Happy Saturday. I'm going to talk fast because I think we're in overtime, but there are a few things that I do have to share that I think you're going to be excited about. I think you have the basic framework that what we're doing is really making history here. The judge has already told you that we said about 27 years ago that right to counsel was important, and that we know now, we've always known that the bond court was a critical stage, but if you were arrested today anywhere in any county of the other 45 in South Carolina, here's what would happen, and this is what's been happening up to now in Charleston. You get put in jail, law enforcement goes and sees the judge that's going to set your bond, they walk in, they have them sign the arrest warrant, and they tell them why they had a good reason to arrest you and the crime you did, and here is your rap sheet. And then you go and stand in front of the judge, and the judge says, do you have anything to say? And then they set a bond. Now, what really happens is that unless you're fairly articulate, that judge generally doesn't have much information about the things that might be relevant to your release. Like, how long have you been living at that residence? And how have we really confirmed that that residence is reliable? What are your ties to the community that would really make a difference? Are you employed? How long have you been employed? Can we verify that? And so what this MacArthur grant has allowed us to do for the first time in South Carolina history is to have a county where a judge is going to get much more rich source of data on this person that they're setting bond on at that critical stage, because Mitch has already talked about how destabilizing an arrest and further detention is. And this slide talks about all the things that people are going to be thinking about. So what's exciting about this is that I do bond hearings now. I have lawyers who have made the sacrificial commitment we go and do bond hearings 7 days a week, morning and afternoon, and we wait until that screener that you saw on TV says that we have these folks that need to be talked to get ready for their bond hearing. And what I see is that judges actually have a smile on their face. They're happy to see us because they have a better fund of information by which they can make a more reasoned determination. Second, we're going to be introducing a risk assessment tool. We haven't really touched on that, don't need to get in the weeds, but there's an objective risk assessment tool that she listed off the criteria that are going to make this a more objective process. Third thing, and this is what I was really supposed to talk about, I represent poor people. In my office, we get about 3,600 new adults every year. In Berkeley County, we get another 1,000. We represent about 600 juveniles too. And each of these people, we're trying to help them find their way out of their legal issues. Now, we know one thing, the only tool in the toolkit for a judge when they're setting bond is, do I let the person go on a PR bond? Or, I don't feel good about just releasing you just on my own signature, because what happens if you reoffend? So what's my tool? Well, can you pay some money to a bondsman? If you can pay some money to a bondsman, you can get out. Now think about that. I can be as bad as I want to be, but if I have the money and I can pay the bond that gets set, what correlation does that have with my danger to the community or my risk of not showing up for court? But that's really the tool in the toolkit that you have. And so the judge is really trying to make an actual decision on whether or not there needs to be preventative detention or not. You can also imagine that, let's imagine that I'm a day laborer earning minimum wage, and you set a bond which a middle-class person or a more wealthy person could make, and it's like, thank you, judge, you just let me out. But that same bond works in a highly discriminatory manner against the low-income person who cannot make that. And so we want to be thoughtful and careful, and judges now are instructed, and happily do, consider the person's economic ability to make a bond, because a bond, we do not want to have our jail be what you would call a debtor's detention facility. And so what you're seeing is the emergence of a highly more objective, thoughtful, careful decision-making process, all within the first 24 hours of a criminal case, so that those destabilizing influences don't occur. So I'm excited about that. I have to say that I'm not only here as the chief public defender for Charleston and Berkeley, but I'm also here, quite honestly, at least personally, because I'm a child of God. And I am excited to be standing in front of this Episcopal Forum. Amen. Because I have a very strong opinion that we look to the criminal justice system as if it's some sort of super entity that's supposed to have all the answers. And I think that is a fundamental social error on our part. What's going wrong here is not just that we have judges or corrections officials that are struggling and not maybe able to handle the problem, but that this really is a program where we're talking to you about how we're going to engage the community to transform the criminal justice system. What excites me about this event is that you heard the head of the Department of Corrections talking about how he needed to get people re-engaged in the community to come home. That's called reentry. Marian Wright Edelman, who heads the Children's Defense Fund, wrote a book about that it takes a village to raise a child. And I contend that it takes a village or a community to have a criminal justice system. What does that really mean? What am I talking about? Well, I would contend, and I think the data supports what I'm about to say, we can do the cool things that our director of the Department of Corrections talked about, Brian Sterling, and get people jobs, but the evidence shows that if you're going to have really people be successful, they need more than a job. What am I talking about? Well, we know other reentry programs around the country started out with just job delivery as their chief deliverable for the people that were coming out of jail. But what they found was that there was profound sadness, brokenness, hurt that was not remedied purely by the job. And so what you look at is what other programs have been slightly more successful. And what you see is that there is everybody in this room, everybody in the country carries around a lot of load on their shoulders. But if you're an ex-offender, if you're someone that's trying to find your way back into the community with no ID, with no job, and with the crushing baggage and disadvantages, it can be overwhelming. It can be a burden too heavy to carry. This is why, in my view, there's a mandate in Scripture that we are called to visit the imprisoned, not to make ourselves feel good, although it will, but because this is an opportunity to bring what I would call, and what I think other successful programs have called, tenderness. In other words, people need to know that they matter and that they are someone who have value, and that sense of empowerment is just as important, if not more, than the material support that we give. The two go hand in hand. Now, why am I saying all this stuff? I know it's a little preachy, and I'm sorry, I'm just a preachy guy. But I would say that there is just as much a lack in our criminal justice system of civic participation, and I would particularly call the people of faith who have this unique mission to go and get involved with reentry programs, visit your prisons, know how understaffed they are, and advocate for their full employment so that we can together have it live up to its name, the Department of Corrections, where when each person enters that place, we're proud of it. We want them to be there because we know that they're going to find their way and that they're going to receive the support and love of the community that's going to empower them to come back and be successful.